The scoreboard says you are winning. GDP up, markets up, jobs up. Every indicator the government uses to grade the economy is flashing green. And yet nearly 40% of Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money, in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization. Something does not add up. Here is what the scoreboard does not show. Since 1979, worker productivity is up 64%. Real wages for the median worker are up 15%. Workers are generating more value than ever in history and keeping less of it than at any point since World War II. This is not bad luck. It is not the pandemic. It is a 40-year structural shift, engineered through policy and tax code that grew the economy and shrank your share of it at the same time. Today, we are breaking down who actually captures economic growth, how the gap was built, and what you can do to stop falling behind a system that was rigged long before you started playing. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to 1971. Imagine it is August. Nixon is on television. In a single 18-minute address, he does something that economists are still arguing about today. He takes the US dollar off the gold standard. Money is no longer tied to a physical asset. It can be printed, expanded, and manipulated, and the rules of who captures economic growth quietly begin to change. But the real turning point comes a decade later. It is 1981. Ronald Reagan enters the White House with a simple theory: cut taxes on corporations and the wealthy, deregulate industry, and growth will trickle down. The idea was that if you let businesses keep more of their profits, they would reinvest them in workers and communities. It sounds reasonable, until you look at what actually happened. Corporate tax rates dropped from 46% to 35% over the decade. Union membership, which had been the primary mechanism keeping wages tied to productivity, began its long collapse, falling from 35% of the workforce in the 1950s to under 10% today. And a new doctrine, championed by economist Milton Friedman, took hold in every boardroom in America. The doctrine said the sole purpose of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value, not worker value, not community value, shareholder value. That was the turning point. And everything since then has followed that logic to its natural conclusion. Here's how the system actually works, and why GDP hides it so effectively. GDP, gross domestic product, measures the total value of goods and services produced in a country. It sounds like a comprehensive measure of national well-being. But here's the catch. It measures output, not distribution. A billionaire buying a $400 million superyacht adds to GDP. So does 1,000 workers each getting a $400 raise. On the scoreboard, they look identical. But in your bank account, they feel very different. Think about it from this angle. Between 1979 and 2020, the top 1% of earners in the United States captured 38% of all income growth. The bottom 90% split 15% of the growth between them. The economy doubled in size. The gains went almost entirely to the top. In industry terms, economists call this the labor share of income, the percentage of GDP that goes to workers as wages versus the percentage that goes to capital owners as profits. And for 40 straight years, that number has been falling. In 1970, labor captured about 65% of GDP. By 2022, that had dropped to under 57%. That 8 percentage point gap sounds small. It is not. Applied to a $25 trillion economy, that is roughly $2 trillion per year, that stopped flowing to workers and started flowing to asset holders. $2 trillion per year, quietly redirected, while the scoreboard flashed green. Now here's where it gets truly dark. It's not just that wages stagnated, it's that the cost of the things wages are supposed to buy exploded at the same time. Since the year 2000, average wages in the United States have risen by about 50% in nominal terms. Sounds okay until you put it next to the other numbers. In the same period, housing costs are up 180%, healthcare is up over 200%, college tuition is up over 300%. Childcare, in many American cities, now costs more than rent. This is the real squeeze. Your income grew, just not nearly as fast as the bill for the life you're supposed to be building. And here is the psychological trap they have set. They call it inflation. They make it sound like a natural weather event, something that just happens, like rain. But these specific categories, housing, education, and healthcare, did not inflate at the same rate as everything else. They inflated at 2 to 4 times the rate of general inflation, in the same decades that wages were suppressed and labor protections were stripped. That is not weather. That is a design. But there's another layer to this that almost nobody connects. The people who got left behind on wages did not just lose income growth. They lost access to the one thing that actually creates wealth in the modern economy: assets. Here is the uncomfortable truth about how wealth works today. It does not come primarily from working. It comes from owning. Owning stocks. Owning real estate. Owning a business. In the last 40 years, the S&P 500 has returned roughly 10% per year. U.S. home prices have increased by an average of 4 to 5% annually. Meanwhile, wage growth has averaged under 1% per year in real terms. If you owned assets, the economy worked for you while you slept. If you only had labor income, you ran on a treadmill that got slightly faster every year. Economists have a name for this phenomenon. Call it assetflation. It is inflation that targets assets specifically. Stocks, real estate, and businesses surge in value, creating enormous wealth for those who already own them. But this same surge makes it nearly impossible for non-owners to ever enter the ownership class. The house that was an achievable goal for a middle-class worker in 1985 now requires a decade of savings just for the down payment. By the time you save that, the price has risen again. It is not a ladder. It is an escalator going up that you can only board if you are already on it. So, if this is so obvious, why do politicians not fix it? Here is the answer. They do not want to. Growth statistics are politically useful. Saying the economy is doing great is one of the most powerful lines a politician can use. It is simple. It is visual. Gross domestic product up, unemployment down, markets at record highs. It fits in a tweet and it wins elections. What does not fit in a tweet is this. Growth is up 3%, but 80% of it went to the top quintile. Real wages adjusted for housing costs are down for the median worker, and the labor share of gross domestic product hit a 70-year low. That is accurate. It is also not how you raise campaign funds. And here is the darker layer. The donor class, the corporations, the private equity firms, the hedge funds that fill political campaign coffers, are precisely the entities that benefit from the current structure. Higher capital gains tax rates would hurt them. Stronger unions would hurt them. Antitrust enforcement that breaks up consolidated industries would hurt them. So those things do not happen. Or they happen slowly, partially, and get quietly reversed. According to research by Princeton political scientists Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page, United States policy outcomes correlate strongly with the preferences of economic elites, and have essentially zero correlation with the preferences of average citizens. Zero. The scoreboard is not just misleading, it is maintained on purpose. So where does that leave us? This feels heavy, but there are things you can actually do, starting now. Number 1, reframe how you read economic news. Every time you hear the phrase, "the economy grew," ask one question. Who captured that growth? Look for wage growth numbers, labor share data, and median household income, not just GDP and stock market indexes. The headline number is a magic trick. The real story is always in the distribution. Number 2, prioritize building asset ownership over chasing income alone. This is the structural reality of modern wealth. Even small, consistent positions in low-cost index funds, like a total market ETF, put you on the right side of assetflation. Time in the market compounds. Labor income does not. Number 3, understand the housing decision differently. If you can access property ownership, even a modest one, you are buying into the asset class that has consistently beaten wage growth for 40 years. If you cannot yet, you are not failing. You are facing a structural barrier that affects an entire generation. Do not internalize a systemic problem as a personal one. Number 4. Support wage-indexed policies and pay attention to antitrust. When labor share of GDP rises, everyone below the top earns more without individual effort. Policies that tie minimum wages to productivity, that restore collective bargaining, and that break up industry consolidation are the structural levers. They do not make headlines. They matter more than almost anything else. Economic growth is real. The numbers are not fake. But growth is like rainfall. It does not matter how much falls if all of it drains to one corner of the field. For 40 years, the field has been tilted. The tilt was designed, lobbied for, written into tax codes, and defended at every election cycle by the people it benefits most. You are not imagining the squeeze. You are not bad at managing money. You are living inside a system that was engineered to grow the scoreboard and shrink your share of it at the same time. Hit the like button and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below. Do you feel better or worse off than your parents at the same age?